so this is iDig training session, and I will meet with you for 4 days at 11 o'clock here. The next 4 days, we'll meet from 11:30 to 1 every day for the rest of the week, and I will take you through the app so you understand the app, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the purpose of this is to teach you how to set up a new excavation. So if you can go to another excavation and set that up, you should have enough knowledge by the time we're done here to be able to do that. So I'm going to start by giving you some background, where this came from and what's going on here at the Agora. So the Agora started digging in the 1930s. This was, you have to remember, some of the other big excavations, Troy, Corinth, these started in the late 1800s. So the 1930s, this was a generation, say, after the first big digs. And so the first big digs, they go in, they start digging. They're essentially kind of treasure hunters digging for stuff. But then once they start going back to their universities and they start looking at the material, they start realizing maybe we should record this, maybe we should record that. So we had at the Agora a generation before Lucy Talcott came in and designed the Agora's recording system. So she had the benefit of, say, a generation of digging to know kind of what kind of information they wanted to record as they were digging. So the system that she designed, which is basically based on context, we call them baskets here, and then you have the finds and the pottery and the relationships between all these different parts. She designed the Agora system. It's still essentially the system we use today. If you want to think about what's happened, I like to think of it in terms of kind of going from a low resolution recording to high resolution. In the beginning, they just had the Agora gridded into 1 meter squares. So they could record the find location of something to 1 meter, say a box. And today we're recording it with total stations and we're down to like the millimeter level. So you can think of the recording system as essentially the same, but it's gotten higher and higher resolution as time goes on. Another interesting thing about the Agora is that it was dug in a series of blocks. So they had to purchase these blocks and then dig them afterwards. And, of course, the ancient buildings did not always follow the block demarcations. So one of the things that happened is that you would dig one block and then you might not get to the one next to it maybe 10, 20 years later. So here again, they're using the original records that were taken when digging one side as they dig the other side. So this was another kind of pressure, say, on the Agora's recording system, where they were figuring out what information they wanted to record as they would dig. So how does this work? So this is the new area where we're digging across the road there. And if you zoom down, there's a road that some of you might have already dug on, leaving the Agora. The painted stoa is up here, and there's a series of rooms and buildings that were along this road. So pretend we're going to take out this little wall fragment here. The first thing that we do is we use the total station to record a bounding box, essentially, around that little wall fragment, around the top of it. They dig it. And as they dig it, they keep all the pottery, and if any finds come out, like special things come out, they'll take specific points on these. And then when they're done with that basket, they'll take another kind of outline of the bottom, and so this will give us kind of a three-dimensional clump of dirt with stuff inside of it, which is what they call the basket here. Some people call it a context. This is the atom, say, of archaeological digging. You record everything that came from that one context together so you can reconstruct what was going on in that area. So the finds will come out. Traditionally, what they would do is they would use a series of notebooks. They had a find notebook, which would record individual finds as they came out. They would catalog these, write the dimensions down, any interesting information, and usually include a picture of it. The pottery that comes out of the basket, this is all kept separate and washed and then read, and this is primarily how they get the date for these various different contexts by looking at the pottery and the coins and things like that. The pottery is written up in a separate notebook called the lot notebook. And here they'll record what basket it's from, they'll give a description, the grid location, the elevation, and then a description of the pottery that was in that basket together, usually with a tentative date for how they date that lot. The notes notebook is kind of a narrative form notebook. This kind of ties it together. This is kind of a daily diary of what's going on. We open this context, where this context is. They take pictures of it. They record the finds that come out and the links to the pottery and the various find numbers that come out. So today, of course, yes, question.
The elevation points are the ones that we take every morning with the total station.
Probably, I imagine what they're doing, what they tend to do with the total station is they set it up and then they'll shoot a point to make sure that it's accurate. They take a point every day on the same point. That the total station is going to give you an X, Y, and Z coordinate, how many meters over, how many meters up and down, and how many meters high, the elevation. So that's what the elevation is, the Z coordinate essentially. It's usually around 50 some meters above sea level here in Niagara. So today we're recording everything using iDig digitally, so it's essentially born digital in the field, and then the assistants will essentially copy the iDig information into the traditional notebooks to keep the continuity of those notebooks going for the people who are still using them, and as a backup. So having the data born digitally means we can easily push it up to a website where you can go to that one context and see the information on it and say all the different photographs that were taken while we were digging that little wall blob. You can look at all the different objects that came out of that one particular basket, and then you can link over to the individual objects and see the catalog information that was recorded. And if, as the object goes through conservation and ends up in final photography, they'll take final pictures of it, and these are all linked into the original excavation data as well. So what you get when you analyze the data, so when you're recording it, you're recording these kind of like little atoms as you go up. But when you start looking at the data and start analyzing it and trying to understand what's happening, it's kind of the reverse. You'll start with one basket, say, here, this little wall we dug, and that might join with another fragment of that wall in a different area. And then you can say, we'll find everything that's kind of touching those walls or connected to it, or everything in the rooms around it, or even all the way up to, say, the whole building that's associated with. And then once you've gone up the hierarchy to be looking at the entire building, then you'll start asking questions like, well, show me all the objects that came out of the whole building, show me all the baskets that came out of that building, and so forth. And so what you're essentially doing is you're building up this kind of upside down grid, this graph they call it, where each one of these little things might be one basket and they go together to form different rooms, and then the whole thing goes together to form one big building. So as you're digging, you're essentially filling in this graph as you go. There's two other perspectives that are often used besides the graph, which is mainly concerned with, say, the temporal relationship between the items. You also have what's called a kind of a bird's eye view as you're looking down on your trench, and these are all the different baskets as you pull them off of the ground and go down. And you have a cross-section view where if you take, imagine taking a big knife and slicing the ground and looking at it from the side. So when we started with iDig, it was basically these three perspectives that we wanted to try to capture and be able to move between as you're essentially excavating. So how does this work?
How many years did it take
to
get it from like notebooks to the...
Notebooks to the new ones? Well, originally we were using Palm Pilots to hook up to the total station to collect the points that they were shooting. And then around 2010, 2011, The Palm Pilot had gone out of use, and we were on eBay looking for used Palm Pilots when we realized, well, this is stupid to base your excavation recording system on these outdated equipment. So that's when the iPad had come out, and so we got the iPad, and we thought, well, we'll just port our total station code over to that and use that to collect the points. But since the screen was so big, we added a plan to it, so you could have a plan on one side, so as you take the points, you could see them show up on your plan. And then we realized, well, we can just put the database on there too, and everything just kind of went into the iPad app, and it kind of grew organically out of that. We started probably 2011, 2012, and then after a couple years, let's say, it's been continually refined, but after like 1 or 2 years, we had something working basically in the field to work with that. So how does this work? Okay, well, I'm going to go over all the buttons and everything in this app, but for now, let's just look at the general situation. You basically have a series of plans you can work on, and if you want to start digging from nothing, you start from scratch, say from this area here, you'll add a new item, and you'll say, I want to add a new context or a basket here, and then you say, I want to add some points to this basket, and you'll use a total station, outline the area that you want to dig. And then you have an identifier you can give it. We can say this is going to be basket 1. And so you'll take this, say, top layer off. And after you've peeled off the top layer, you might start finding a level underneath it you want to dig separately. So they'll switch baskets, and they'll say, let's make a new basket, attach a basket to this, and let's say that we're only going to dig half the room now. And so now we have basket 2 come in there. And as you're digging basket 2, you might find something like a coin. So we'll say we're going to attach a find to this. We're just going to call it coin. And then as you go through, and then you might close that basket. So what happens in, let me give a point to this find. Let's say it was, let's say we found it right there. Okay. So now we have a coin on there. So, yes?
So we pay points every time we open the basket.
That's right.
And then every time we close it.
That's right.
But can we use the same points for the closure and the opening of the next
You can.
basket if they have the same?
Yeah, if they have the same outline, you can copy paste those points to the new one, and that becomes your new open. Yeah. So what you're doing is you're slowly building up this relationship graph from your baskets and the items that are related to them over time. So you start by just adding things as you go, and the graph will build up by itself with the relationships. Once you have, let's say, a full season, then it's going to look like something like this. And now at this point, what you're dealing with is on the left here, you have a list of all the things that are in your trench. So if it's not in the list on the left, it basically doesn't exist for you. So the list on the left is a series of types, like baskets, and a series of items inside of them. And each one of these types, baskets, finds, cross-sections, features, photos, lots, other plans, each one of these types has its own set of fields that you'll define that you want to record on them. In baskets, you might want to record things like the diggers, the buckets that you took out, what type of basket is it, the page numbers, things like that. With finds, you might want to record other different kind of fields. You might want to record the inventory number, the section number, things like that. So you're basically dealing with a big list of items on the left, and then some kind of graphical representation of them on the right. So here, if we look at, say, the baskets, you can say, let's start with the features. Let's say the big things in the trench. So here's room 2, here's room 1. And if I select something on the right, it's going to try to select that thing on the left to show you which thing it is. And vice versa. If I select something on the left, it's going to select something on the right to try to show you where that particular thing is. So there's a concept of all the items on the left and then some kind of representation of them on the right. So here we got the rooms. You can say I want to just look at the finds. You can use this type menu up in the top left to filter your finds down and say, I just want to look at these things. And again, it's going to try to highlight the thing on the left that you're looking at, or vice versa. If I select something on the left, it's going to try to find that thing on the right and highlight it for me. You can look at just the baskets, let's say, just the dirt that came out of this area. That's another way you can filter these things down. And then you can also use the pencil tool to either select an area, you can circle an area that you want to use. You can select it either going left. Hang on. You can either select something going left, in which case you'll get a dashed line, and this will select anything that is touching that area that you've selected. Or you can circle right, and this is only going to include things that are inside the area you selected. So the way I always remember it is if you circle left, that means you're a liberal and you're leaning left and you let everything in. If you're circling right, you're conservative and you only want the things inside. So two different ways of selecting an area with the pencil. And then with the pencil, you can also just draw a line and it will show you a cross section of that area you've done. And then on each one of these, you can select the thing you're interested in and then swap back and forth between the views. So you can switch between plan view, cross-section view, or the relationship view to see these different kind of items and select from here. So this is basically how you deal with when you have a lot of information. And as soon as you start selecting things and filtering things, a button will appear in the top left. And this button basically means take me back to the beginning with everything shown and not filtering anything. So as soon as I start filtering things down, if I filter, let's say, by the baskets, now that button will appear in the top left, and I can hit that to go back to seeing everything again. If I select something with a pencil, again, the button appears top left, and I can just go right back to the beginning. So the button on the top left will always take you back to seeing everything. And then you can use the different tools to switch between the perspectives. So this is basically the kind of the core big picture of iDig. The second part of this is the legacy data. So since we were digging from the 30s, yes, question?
When you were in the app, it only showed beta data west. What about the whole excavation, or do we like have different codes?
You do. I'm gonna go through that as soon as I'm done with this part.
Okay.
That'll be my first thing I'll show you. Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Okay, so the legacy data, this consisted of, they had catalog cards for each object. So these were all, there was about 80,000 of these and about another 80,000 coins. So one of the first things they did is typed all these into a database so that they can search these objects. We also had a lot of photographs, slides, photographs from the very beginning, outdoor photographs, photographs of objects. We had drawings, things like this, where people would go in and draw the finds. They would do drawings of architectural blocks and things like that, and also the state plans that would do. So we had a lot of these plans. And then we had the publications. So that's kind of the whole stack of information from the Agora, from the original excavation material all the way through to the final publication. So this was the material that we wanted to try to digitize and make available for people. So we started with the notes notebook, because this kind of is the trunk that ties all the different pieces together. And there were about 930 of these notebooks, so we scanned these, so we had page scans of them, and then wrote a program that allowed us to essentially annotate, draw on top of these scans, and highlight various things like dates. We could highlight grids, you could highlight elevations, pottery lots, find and coin numbers, and things like that. And so once you have these notebooks annotated, then you can do two different things. You can first start, let's say, at the notebook level. So here are all the notebooks here divided by section. So we can go into section BZ here. These are all the notebooks that were done for recording BZ. Go to BZ1. Here's the original notebook. So this was one done by John Camp. And so you can flip through the notebooks. The annotations can be turned on and off. And you can go through like normal, but there's also links from, say, the pictures that were pasted into the notebooks to the high resolution photographs that were taken of these different things. Things like the dates and the find numbers, you can link from a find number to where it actually is in the find notebook and things like that. But commonly what's done is things like, let's take this plan here on the left. So these are the Byzantine layers. Wall A down here at the bottom, we can start with that. If I turn the annotations on, you can see that a cross section has been drawn across wall A there. So I can click on that cross section. That'll take me to where that is. And then if you know a little bit about walls, is what they do when they build a wall is they'll dig a hole in the ground. They'll pack in their foundation blocks, and then they'll pack dirt up against the side of it. So if you look at the dirt that comes right against the side of the wall foundation, the pottery in that dirt will usually tell you approximately when they put that wall in. So here we can just click on that lot. That'll take us to the lot notebook. And now we can see that this footing trench of wall A is about 9th, 10th century AD. So that's when that wall went in. And similarly, after a building will collapse, they'll take all the blocks from that wall and reuse them in other things. So the dirt that ends up on top of the wall foundation, this robbing trench here, this will tell us when the wall went out of use. And here you can see it's basically 12th century. So already you get a sense of, this wall was in play between about the 9th to the 12th century. There's some question mark there on the 12th century dating. So here we can go to page 37 where they dug this layer, this footing trench above the wall. And if we look at the coins here, they found 3 coins in this level. These 3 coins right here. You can see the first one is the 12th century. There's an illegible Byzantine 12th century coin, but then there's one very well dated coin to 1280 to 1287. So they have one coin from the 13th century. So the question is did that coin work its way down into that layer, or is this robbing trench really from the 13th century? So that just very quickly gives you a sense of how you can use the annotations as buttons to say, here we have a grid location. I can click on the grid and it's going to take me to the plans and it's going to show me where that grid is located on the plans. But once you have that information, once you know what notebook pages are on which place in the plan, then you can go in the opposite direction. So here, let's go back to our little demo trench here. You'll notice that in this street leaving the Agora, there's a series of rooms on the right-hand side. And the orientation of the interior walls, there are 2 different types of orientation here. One goes a little bit more horizontally than the other one. So if we want to find out what's going on here, we can take this intersection with wall 10 and wall 11 where they kind of cross. And now I can say I want to query the database, and I'm going to use a special pencil here, Talcott's pencil, and that will pull in anything that's ever happened, say, in this area right here, a big blob of data. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color these items by the phase of the pottery, by the chronology. I'm going to draw a cross-section across them, and I'm only going to look at, let's say, the baskets. So here, these are color-coded by the chronology. The Roman are red, the Hellenistic are blue, the Greek layers are green, brown is a Byzantine layer. So if you look at, say, basket 21 here, that covers the entire intersection of that wall. So I can go and I can link to the actual original notebook page where they dug this. And here you can see what happened probably is they took out a big Byzantine pithoi, one of these big round pith ore they sunk into the ground. And right underneath it, they found the first wall fragment there. Now, if you go back to iDig and you start going down, you can say basket 30, go over and look at that. And here you can see what they did is they opened up the area just to the side, and they found the lower kind of wall course on a different orientation. So already you get a sense of the phasing of these. First you had this lower one, and then you had this upper wall built on top of it. If you keep going down further, 34, you can see what they did is they found one of these Hellenistic pyres. And this is where they would dig a little hole in the ground and put a bunch of little pottery in there and have some kind of ritual kind of blessing of the new structure. So it's nice that you find one of these at the same spot that they're making these architectural changes. And now we can just say, let's go to Pyre J227, that's what they call this thing. This will find all the different objects that came from that pyre. So you can look at these, you can click through and see all the photographs that were taken of these various objects as they were coming out, going through conservation, getting cleaned up until the final photography of all the different little pots in that pyre. So that gives you a sense of how you can take the old excavation data, digitize it in a way that then you can reuse it in the field today as you're digging. So back to if there's no questions at this point, everyone's good so far? Okay, so let's look at iDig in more detail here in terms of what's going on. So the first thing you'll notice at the very top left, if you click on the title of the trench, there's a series of trench names here that are located on my iPad. So iDig stores everything inside a trench. And you can think of a trench as just like a folder. And inside that folder are a bunch of different items. So if I start with what we were looking at before, Beta Theta West 13, this is one of the Agora trenches. It's got baskets, finds, cross-sections, features, photos, lots, other, and plans. I can look at some of these other excavations. Here's a very simple project we did. And this project was essentially going out on the site and cataloging all the immovable objects that exist on the site. So here, for example, is an architectural triglyph fragment. And here they've gone out, they've taken 2 pictures of this thing and linked it to the actual find number with the inventory number on it. So in this trench, there's really only 3 types of things. Inside the trench, there are finds, there's photographs, and there's plans. If we look at some of these other ones, if we go to Keros and look at their excavation, here's one of the trenches from Keros, and you can see they have an untyped category here where they have this daily point, and here you can see they're basically going through and shooting the same point every day when they start the day to make sure that their total station's set up right. But, you know, they have similar things. They have fills and deposits, they call them. They don't call them baskets. They have surfaces, so they're tracking their surfaces a little bit differently. The structures are kind of like the features in the Agora. They have these ASU units, which are kind of subdivisions of their baskets, which let them break their baskets down into subunits. Special finds, which are similar to the finds that we have. Samples and bags, so they're keeping track of their samples they're doing, flotation, obsidian, bone, shell, so on and so forth. And then they have photographs that they took, and they have plans. So some of these are similar from trench to trench, and some of them are a little bit different depending on the excavation. If you look at Molivoti, here's another excavation. They use loci for their baskets, ceramics, bones, finds, hand-picked charcoal, photos, and plans. There's the Swiss excavations. And here, similar, they use context, so they're using these for their baskets to track the dirt. They have features they're keeping track of, artifacts, their finds, tiles and lithics, lots, photographs, sections, plans, and others. And if we look at Poros as a kind of a weird one, this was a underwater survey around the island of Poros. And here, what they're trying to do is essentially track the dives that were done. So here, these are actually someone going down in the water and surveying, taking pictures as they go of the things they find, keeping track of who's diving, where the track is that they're diving. They also have artifacts of things they find, but they have events here, which is a new type. This is where they're keeping track of whether they measured an object, whether they photographed it, lifted it, and things like that. So in each one of these trenches, it's going to have a series of types, and each type is going to have a series of fields attached to it as you go. And you can edit the trenches. You can, if I say I want to edit the trenches, this will give me my list of trenches. I can type in a new one, A, B, C. And now I'm just going to get a very blank trench here with nothing in it at all. No plans, no items, no nothing. You can go to a trench and copy and paste items. So for example, I can go to the beta theta trench here, look at the plans, select one of these plans. The bottom left menu at the very bottom is kind of an action menu. It lets you do things with what you've selected. In this case, I just want to say copy this plan, and I want to take it to the new trench that I made, and I want to paste it. Now, when you paste something from one trench to the other, you're going to get this pop-up box. And what happens is iDig will treat everything inside your trench according to kind of two different ways of looking at it. There are the things that are in your trench, the things you find as you go, and then there are things that are not in your trench that come from the outside, such as like a previous season's context or something like that. So if you look at, for example, at all the things that we pulled in, let's see. So if I want to adopt this plan into the trench, if I hit adopt, it's going to go in and it's going to change the trench name to ABC because that's the name of the trench. And I can edit this thing. So this thing is currently in my trench, in my ABC trench. If I go back, so let's say to Beta Theta West, and I take the other plan, and I copy that, and go back to the ABC trench, paste it, and I say I just want to paste this in it's from another season. Now this item will retain its original trench name. I will not be able to edit it. It'll be read-only, okay? And it's considered an archival item. So again, if I select, let's say I use the pencil, and I select Talcott's pencil, and then I say, find me everything that's located in this spot. All these things that are going to come in, these are going to come in as archival items. I can't edit them. Okay, so they're fixed. They're from other seasons. I can attach things to them. If I have something in my trench, I can use the relationships and say, right now, if I just say, I want to tidy up all the archived items, that'll just get rid of them, anything archived in your trench. So that allows you to pull things in, play with it, and then get rid of them when you don't need them. But if I pull in, let's say, a bunch of archival items into this trench, and then I make a new thing in this trench, let's say a new context, a new basket, and then I add a relationship to it. I say this basket is below basket, let's say 50 from 2019. Now, if I throw away all these archived items, 50 is going to stay around because it's attached to something in my trench right now.
But can you edit it now?
No, I can't edit that still because that thing is in the database on the server and the master version of that lives there.
Okay.
So you can't actually change anything from previous seasons. And this brings up a very important rule that iDig follows, which is everything on my iPad is mine as a supervisor or as an assistant or whoever. This is all my data. Nobody outside of this iPad can change it. And I can't change the data on anyone else's iPad unless you specifically go through a process of syncing your data between the iPads, which we'll cover tomorrow in terms of how that works. So anything you change on your iPad, if I go in, let's say to Beta Theta West on my iPad, Beta Theta West 2013, I have this trench on here. If I throw this basket away, there's a trash can on here. I can show the trash and you can see what's in the trash. It's kind of a way so that you don't actually delete things right away. And most people don't ever empty the trash during the season, so there might be a bunch of junk in their trash. But it's just another way of saving, making sure the data gets saved. I can take that item and I can put it back. I can do whatever I want with this item on my trench. I can like change the title, put my name on there. That's not going to change it anywhere else, not in the Agroz database, not on anyone else's iPad. That's all mine. And when someone syncs with me, they'll see that I made that change and they'll have to accept that change. Anyone I sync with, I will have to vet their data and say, I want that, I want that, I want that. No one can change anything on my iPad, and if I change it, it doesn't affect anyone else's. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So let's start looking at some of these. Let's start looking at some of these buttons. So we have the trench menu at the top. This will list all the different trenches on your iPad. You can edit the trenches at the bottom there. This is also in the settings, which we'll go through in more detail later. All the list of trenches that are currently on your iPad. You can take a trench here. You can open it up. I can delete it if I want. I can just get rid of it, and it's going to delete that whole trench from my iPad. And it's not going to be on there anymore. Okay? The whole point of iDig is basically to capture the data, record it in the field, and then export it to something else. So if I'm in a trench at any point in time, I can select export this trench, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a folder with everything in this trench, so I can easily take that and import it into a GIS system or another database or anything I want. There's a bunch of different ways to look at the data inside iDig. When you're on the actual pad, the easiest way is with the Files app, which is default on every iPad. And here I can select on my iPad, and there's an iDig folder. And iDig will expose all of the data it uses. So everything iDig uses is here. So you can see there's a bunch of different folders here. The PKG files are the trench files. So there's a trench called Agra. There's a trench called, I think I just moved it somewhere, but I'll check that later. There's a trench called Demo, and so on and so forth. If you look in here, you can go down to the bottom, and I can see my Beta Theta West 2013 exported folder, which it just made. And this will have a whole series of files inside, depending on what people want to do with the data afterwards. It'll have the actual configuration, the preferences file that was used, the configuration. It'll have a series of basically Excel spreadsheets. These are CSV files that can be read inside of Excel. There's a numbers app on the iPad as well that we put there that you can use to go in and see these various spreadsheets. So I can go down to Beta Theta West, for example. I can look, let's say, in my types folder. Now here, for each one of the types, it's exported an Excel spreadsheet. So I can open these up. This is the baskets that came from this trench. And now each item, each basket is basically going to be one row in this table. So there's basket 1. If you keep going down, you'll get to basket 2, and so on and so forth. So each item in iDig ends up becoming one single row in your Excel spreadsheet with all of your fields along the top. Each field ends up being one column, basically. And so as you export this, you can see the contents field, the description field, and so on and so forth. So the whole goal of iDig is to basically record the data and then export it in a very, very simple text format that can be imported into any other kind of software. So that's the big round trip for recording data. We can keep going through some of these buttons and looking at some more of these. Let's start here at the top. The first button is the settings button. We'll go through this in details. This lets you set up things like what trenches you're looking at, connecting to total stations and things. The next button is just a little help button that turns on little overlays for reminding you what each one of these buttons do. The third button is kind of a view button. It shows, it determines what you're seeing on the right. Here we're looking at the plans. If I want to select an area, or let's select a cross section across this whole thing here. So now I'm looking at it from a cross section perspective. I can switch back and forth between plan, cross section. I can double tap on the screen to toggle between these. Sometimes this is useful for when you want to see where that particular thing was in each one of these views. I can switch between a relationship view, which is tracking all the relationships between the items. I can switch between, there's also an index view, which just lines all these things up on the right. And sometimes this is useful if you need to go through and look at each one of these items, let's say, and make sure that you filled out certain fields or something like that. And then there's these two, temporal matrix and spatial matrix. These are similar. These are relationship fields. And it helps to understand exactly how iDig handles these relationships. So let's look at that. There's sections inside each item. If I select an item, it just highlights it. If I select the button on the right, it'll go into this field editor that'll allow me to edit all the fields on this particular item. Basket 63 there. You can tap, just like on the top, on the main list, I can tap on the section titles to collapse these different sections. If I go inside one of these items, I can also click on the field sections here and collapse all the different fields down. So you can very quickly and easily see which fields you're interested in. The general field section is basically the same or similar, say for each item. It usually has the trench name, the type of thing you're dealing with. It'll have an identifier, its main name, say, a title, and a lot of these will have a start and an end date for when you have a basket and you're digging the basket. If you look at a find, for example, a find will just have one date, a start date, because usually you just record the date that you actually found it. If you look at after the general section, there's a related image field here that'll let me swipe through all the photographs that have been, say, attached to this particular basket. I can take the photographs full screen. I can add a new photograph. There's a camera button at the bottom. If I'm looking at an item and I say I want to take a picture, you hold up your camera. You take a picture, I want to use the photo, and then what iDig will do is it'll automatically create a photo item and link it to this particular basket. So that'll give me this field. You can also, there are some basic kind of annotation tools you can use to annotate the images. You can put text on here and write text and things like that, change line weights and all that, or you can just throw away the annotations. The annotations live with the data. They don't actually affect the image at all. The image will still be the same raw image underneath. The point section, this allows you to edit points and to add new points to items. We'll deal with that by itself. The description field here, there's a contents field. There's individual fields here for the diggers, the buckets, and so on and so forth. The chronology field is kind of important. It uses numbers for dates. So this will say it starts at 1000 AD and goes to 12225. And this chronology section is used to determine essentially the color of that particular layer when you're viewing these things colored by the chronology. There's a status field here that's useful. So if you look at the settings, color items by either type, status, phase, or graphite. So we can look at some of these. So if I choose status, this is the mode that most of the supervisors use it in. This will color each item based on what it has in its status section. So if something's all done, I'm all done processing it, it'll be marked as all done. You can toggle it to attention, which will turn the thing red so that you know you have to look at that thing. Green will process, yellow, waiting for something, or it's ready if it's brown. These are kind of based on the workflow. So as people are processing things like fines and baskets, they'll often just set the status for that particular item. And that way they're only seeing the things that are in play at that one time. There's a status filter in the top right that will let you say, I'm only interested in things that are attention or ready or closed or open or something like that. So again, you can filter down what you're seeing based on its current status. And most people will use it like this in the field while they're working. So similar, you can filter by status, filter by the type of the thing it is. The other color modes, there's a phase color mode. If I color items by the phase, this is going to use the chronology field to try to determine the actual color that it uses. Let's just look at the baskets here. Okay, so each one of these baskets now is going to be colored based on what it has in its chronology field. So that's a kind of another special field, the chronology and the status field. You can always at any point in time hold down on one of these things and just drag it off to the side. This is sometimes useful when you're drilling down into it. If you drag it away from where it belongs, it's going to turn red. And then if I just double tap on it, the red thing will go back to where it belongs again. So that's one way to kind of drill down into the items and get by them. You'll also notice that up here in the corner, there's a bunch of items that will be up here as well. If I select these things up here, you'll notice that essentially these are things that don't have any points associated with them. So if iDig's trying to draw something on the right and there's no points associated with it, it'll go up here in the corner as just kind of like, they call it the sideline. So you can also, if you want, take something big, like say this room 1 right here, and I can edit it and say, I want its status to be sidelined, and that'll just send it up into the corner by itself to get it out of your way. Oftentimes what will happen is when people start digging, one of the first things they do is they'll create something like a feature or something like that, and then they'll add points and they'll say, okay, this is my feature, my whole trench. That's my first feature I'm going to make. So now they have this big thing that's kind of blocking every time they touch it. They just end up touching that instead. So the sidelined idea is it allows you to make something if you want that, but I'm just going to sideline that for the rest of the season so I don't actually have to deal with it. So the sideline is kind of a manual way of going through and saying I want that thing to be in the corner.
So when you sideline something, you can bring it back?
Yes, you can change its status. So now it's sidelined. If I change its status to sideline no, it'll go back to where it was before.
So there's not something like move to back?
No, sidelined is the move to the background. Just get out of my way is basically what you're saying on that particular thing. So I'm going to throw this in the trash. So, and the last color mode that's on there is graphite. That just means no color. It's for people who don't want to deal with the color, and it just makes everything gray.
Thank you.
So you've got color things by type, by status, by the phase of the pottery, or no color at all. Those are your options for coloring things based on the layers. So let's look at some more of these buttons here. We have the settings, which we'll deal with. There's the help menu. There's the layout menu to how you want to view these things. In terms of the temporal and spatial matrix, let's deal with those now. So iDig, basically when we started, there were, a lot of different types of relationships people wanted to make based on archaeological relations, say. And so what we did with iDig is we came up with essentially 3 spatial relationships. So this is like, is this thing above something? Is it below it? Or is it next to it? So you can specify those 3 spatial relations. There's 3 temporal relationships. If is this before that thing? Is it after that other thing? Or is it the same time as that thing? Is it coeval with it? Those are the 3 temporal relations. And then there's 2 which are kind of containment relationships. Like I'm a basket and I include all these different finds inside of me. So inside of me are all these different finds. And from the finds perspective, it's like I'm contained by or I'm included in that basket. So you got 3 spatial, 3 temporal, and then these 2 inclusion relations. And we also, I think, added cuts and is cut by to track that particularly important, say, relationship. So on these, I'm looking at basket. Let's get a better basket here. Let's get basket 1. So basket 1, the relationships is above basket 6. In the relationship fields, I can double tap on a relationship to actually jump to it. So right now I'm in basket 1. Fix this thing. And if I want to jump to say basket 6, I can just double tap basket 6 and now I'm in basket 6. Looking at basket 6 things. Go back to basket 1. It's above basket 24, it's after basket 6, after basket 24. Usually the spatial and the temporal relationships will mirror each other. So if I go and I look at let's just look at baskets here. And if I look at just the relationships, it's showing me both. If I just look at the spatial relations, it's just showing me these particular relationships that are spatial. If I switch this to the temporal matrix, it'll shift slightly. What normally happens is they'll dig spatially, so they'll record just this is below that, this is below that, and then as they go. When they're done, a traditional Harris matrix will only show you if you have something like, let's say, a basket 1, which covers, let's say, a basket 2, and then if you have something like a basket 3, like this, that, let's say, covers a little bit of 2, when they do this spatially, they will usually just write, here's basket 1, underneath basket 1 is basket 2 and basket 3. So there are your spatial relations. When you do a traditional Harris matrix, what you're really interested in is just the minimum amount of information necessary. And since 3 here is also kind of a little bit above 2, right? So what they'll do is they'll break this spatial relationship and they'll say it actually goes 1, 3, and then 2. And there's your temporal relationships. Because you know that 2 is before 3, because 3 is on top of it a bit, And they're both basically before 1. So when they do the traditional Harris matrix at the end of the season, one of the things they do is they usually start with their spatial relations, and then they prune them. They cut some of the spatial relationships so only the temporal ones are left. So that's the point of these two tracking, just the spatial relationships and just the temporal ones. You also have this basket belonging to a cross section because the cross section's over it. It belongs to a lot because it was lotted together into that lot. It includes photographs. So here's some photographs, 603, so on and so forth. Jump back to basket 1. And so you can easily make a new relationship. So right now, let's say I have basket 1 is over basket 6. So let's stick it over 17. So I want to add a new relation. I want to say basket 1 is above basket 17. And as soon as you do that, now the graph will adjust to accommodate that new relationship. So you can edit these relationships however you want as you go and create those. So that's the layout menu. The plan menu will allow you to switch back and forth between plans. So if you have multiple plans in your trench, here we have 2. This will let me switch back and forth between those plans, and it's just going to select the background plan. You can also just select the plan item itself, and that'll switch between the 2 different background plans as well. You have the status filter, the type filter. We've looked a little bit about the pencil for drawing cross sections, for selecting items, whatever you want to select here. The pencil also has 2 other modes. If you hold down on it, you get a pop-up menu. And these are the 2 pencils that are related to bringing things in from the archive. So the Talcott pencil is the easiest to understand. That just says search in this area I select for anything that's ever happened in that area. If you draw a cross section across this and you look at all this stuff that was done previously, let's color this by something else so you can see the phase. So you can see the phases here. What the camp pencil tries to do is it tries to pull in just the lowest layer that's covering the area you selected. So the whole point of the camp pencil is if I go out in the field right now, for example, and I go to this area, let's switch this to the photo. If I go to this area, as it is right now, and I select this area with the camp pencil, it's going to try to find the last stuff that was dug just above that ground layer that I'm at now. So if I go out and I touch the ground, like right there in the middle, it's going to say 35 here, these little fragments of 35, that was the last thing that was done on that particular spot in the field. Now, when I pull these in, it's going to crop them, right? Because, 51, the original shape of 51, if I, double tap it, essentially, it's going to show you its original form. 35 here is just fragments. If I double tap that, that's going to expand and show me all of 35. For 114 here got brought in because just a little area of 114 nipped the section here. So I double tap 114, it'll expand that out to its original full extent. So these items are essentially cropped. So one thing you can do on the action menu is you can tidy up cropped items, and that'll go through and expand all those things to their original full size when you dug it. But when you camped it, you were only interested in the little bits and pieces that were right above the ground. Yes?
Can I ask you?
Yes.
Can you repeat how do these shapes get their numbers? Why we have 72? Why we have 22?
That was the original basket number that was given. So when you start a trench each year, they'll start with 1, and they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on basket 10. So in 2012, this is basket 114 from 2012. There's basket 71 from 2013.
Oh, we have all the years of
Yes, so
together.
yeah,
Okay.
so when you're using the Talkit and the Camp Pencil, you're actually searching an online database of all previous seasons. So in the settings, we'll cover this in detail at some point, but there's an address that you can put in for the central server where all the previous seasons excavations data is with a username and password, and that's what allows me to do these kind of queries where I can say search the database for any previous season information that was right there, and it will pull it in regardless of what year. There's something in 2016. This is from 2015, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter anymore. Yes.
Could you maybe summarize Cam's pencil a little bit?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky, but most of the time the way it's used is at the beginning of the season when the excavator is starting up. I'm going to tidy up all the archived items. It's going to get rid of them all from my trench. Okay. So if I take a brand new trench, let's just take this plan, copy this plan. Let me make a new trench. I'm going to call it ABC. I'm going to paste that plan in and adopt it into the trench. So now I have a background plan. So I'm starting out the season, and I want to dig in this room right here. So the thing I want to know is in every section of this room, what was the last thing that was done and when? And so I'm going to use the Camp's pencil, and it's going to find me the lowest thing that was done in that area. So now I know that if I dig over here, the last thing that happened was in 2014, they opened a basket right there. And if I want to dig right here where 51 is, those little sections right there, that was 51 on the ground if you go on the ground. Okay? It's a little bit strange because it comes in all cropped, but if you tidy up the crop dot and expands these all, this will show you all the actual areas that they dug. Some of these only a tiny bit may be left, and some other ones might be underneath it. If I do a cross section across this, you'll see there's a lot of these layers that, the last thing that was done was that, underneath that, 64 is the last thing done there, so on and so forth. How are we doing on time? 38. Okay, good. So that is the top menu, the plans, switching the plans, filtering by status, filtering by type, filtering by area, or doing searches on previous excavation seasons. The pencils used for that. Down at the bottom left, there's the action menu. This will toggle between showing the trash and hiding the trash. So you get a little bit of a trash thing going on there. It'll allow you to copy and paste items, tidy up the archived items, get them out of your trench when you don't need them anymore. The autofill temporal relations, that's not supposed to be turned on. That's just in mind. What happens is, like I said, a lot of people will dig spatially. They're just recording relationships spatially as they go. And then at the end of the season, what they'll say is, hey, can you go through, and every time I said this basket's below something else, make it automatically add a temporal relationship to say it's before. So they'll dig spatially. Then they'll autofill all the temporal relationships. They have those so that they can prune the temporal relationships and go backwards to get rid of the ones that aren't necessary. There's the export trench function, which will create a folder in iDig's folder, which will have all the information from this trench, which you can take and use somewhere else, all the photographs, all of the tables that are generated. There is a sort menu here. Let's go back to Beta Theta West. there's a sort menu here. I can either sort all the items on the left by number. So in baskets, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. In finds, it goes 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. I can sort them by title. If I want to sort all these things by the title that I've given it. I can sort by the phase. So now I'm looking at it chronologically sorted. I can sort it by the excavation date. What date did I actually excavate that thing? Or there's a timeline view, which puts the most recently modified thing at the top. So if I go into a basket, let's say, and I make a change to this, some kind of change to basket 92, basket 92 now starts at the top. So I've not seen people use any other sort mode besides maybe timeline if they're looking for stuff they've recently modified, or the number. Those are the two most common ones. So it's not used very much, sorting by the other things. The camera button. If I'm outside in the list and I'm just looking at all the different items and I take a picture and I say use photo, it's going to make a new photo item. But you'll notice in the relationships, there's nothing attached. This photo's not attached to anything. So what I've basically done is just added a new photo to my trench, but it's not attached to anything. If, on the other hand, I'm inside something, let's say like a find or something like that, and I hit the camera button, now it's going to take that picture and it's going to automatically attach it to that find. It'll automatically make this relationship for me. Includes photo 724. So there's 724 automatically attached to the find, but that picture is going to be out there in the photos as well. If I go to the end of the photos, it'll probably be here too. So you can see there's the photo that's attached to the find, that's in there, and the photo that we just took, HEMA, and it's just sitting out there by itself. So it's a photo button. The plus button will just add a new item. Everything starts off as untyped until I give it a type, and I want this to be a basket, and then it will autofill the next number, and it'll do things like that, and I can add the data on that to make new things. So so that's the main thing there. If you look inside, if you're looking at the editor for the item, there's an action button here too as well. So in other words, I can take something like, let's look at a basket here. So if I can take basket 1 here, I'm looking at basket 1. The action menu will also allow me to do the camp and talcate function. So I can just take basket 1 and just camp that to find out everything that was above it. And now I know all the different baskets that were above basket 1 that I have to attach to from previous years. And same with the talcating function. I can do that from here as well and just talcate everything that's ever existed above basket 1. Cross it, and then see that whole hierarchy there on top. So tidy up the archived items, go back into basket 1. There is, when you're doing the editing mode, there's a kind of a full screen type button. This will just bring up the editor in a more full screen version that a lot of people like to use when they're typing big basket descriptions and things like that. So that's all that is. Camera, the plus button, if I'm inside of an item and I hit the plus button, it's going to ask me what do I want to attach. These can be defined in the preferences to say I want to attach a find to this. And then what it will do is it'll automatically create that relationship for me. But you can always edit these manually if you want to set the relationships however you want. So that's inside, the button's inside, that covers those. So what I'd like to do is give everyone an iPad. I'd like you to play with it a little bit tonight. I'd like you to make a new trench, a brand new trench, copy and adopt a plan from another trench into it, and then make some fake baskets and finds and things like that. Just do like a fake excavation. So I'm going to make a new basket, and I'm going to put this basket. When you add the points, you can connect to a total station, but you can always just double tap on the plan, and it will add points for you. So make a new little excavation with some baskets and finds. for an area. Make a new trench, copy a plan over, make a little excavation, and then tomorrow what we'll do is we'll look at the sinking part and sinking the trenches back and forth with each other. So do you want to give them? Is there anyone who particularly has a preference on a big or a small iPad? We have two sizes. There's the mini and there's the big one. Does anyone have a preference on one of these? If you do, speak now. Otherwise, we'll just give them out.
Be silent forever.
Just pick one and one charger.
Take a charger. Take a charger and an iPad.
Thank you.
You have a smaller one.
Everything should be on the dock at the bottom that you need, the different apps. There's the Numbers app there. You can play around with that. iDig and the Notebook app are there. And Mariana, you're gonna install it on yours tonight?
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
Should I give it to?
Yeah. Why don't you? How many do we have left? We have one left. If you want, you can take this tonight and try to get it installed on yours. But there's two other people coming tomorrow, so we'll need two more. So if you find your iPad, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will text you.
Okay.
I will send you an email.
Okay. That sounds perfect.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Do we need to be careful with anything because I already opened the apps and I see things?
Yes. Okay. So again, you can do whatever you want with the iDig on your pad. You can delete trenches. I would suggest not deleting the default trenches because they're useful just to kind of play around in. But you can delete any trenches you want and change that. The people before you might have left stuff behind. You can get rid of it. There's the iDig app in the menu bar. There's the Notebook app in the menu bar. Those are both in there. So you can experiment and play with those a little bit. The Numbers app should be in your menu bar. This will let you browse. This basically the Files app, and then you use individual apps. Like Numbers is their version of Excel. I can go on my iPad, iDig, and then I can go in. If I've exported a trench, I can open up these different spreadsheets to look at the data that came out of them. The JSON stuff we'll deal with by itself. I think that's basically all I want you to do. Start playing with it a little bit. Try to come with questions tomorrow. Anything that's weird you don't understand is good. Make a new trench, copy some plans into it, make a little bit of an excavation, and then we can look at those tomorrow.
Mariana's trench.
Exactly.
Established.
There you go. Perfect. Perfect.
I wanted to use the emojis as well, but well, let's save them for later.
So, sorry, this will be deleted.
Which one is this? This is Pollock's. Yeah, I would just delete this one. I'd go to the trench menu, edit trenches, delete that one.
Okay.
There's a georeference test one you can delete too, so you can just start with just those two.
Thank you.
And then I will see you here tomorrow, 11:30.